The alarm on my wrist buzzed twice, which meant someone was standing outside my cabin door who was not supposed to be there. I opened it anyway, because curiosity has always been my weakness, and found a Threshkari woman pressed against the wall of the corridor, her breath shaking, her eyes wide with a fear that no training could fake. Her name was Severin. I knew her only as the quiet administrator who signed off on cargo permits 3 floors above my workstation. We had exchanged maybe 10 words in 2 years. Now she was gripping my sleeve like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. "They took my sister," she whispered. "Please, you are the only one who might help me." "I am Daniel Cole, a freight technician on Outpost Ren Vishal, which sits at the very edge of the Threshkari Empire, like a coin balanced on a blade. Humanity has a trade agreement here, thin and fragile, the kind of peace that exists only because nobody has tested it yet. My job is to keep cargo moving and my head down. That is the entire survival strategy for humans in this sector." But Severin was not asking me as an alien asking a stranger. She was asking me as one person begging another person not to let something terrible happen in silence. "Come inside," I said. "Tell me everything. Quickly." She told me her sister, Illyra, had been pulled in by something called a compliance unit, accused of spreading dissenting words in a public forum. The charge was thin, almost invented, but that did not matter. Once the compliance unit took someone, they rarely came back the same. Severin had already gone through every proper channel. Every door had closed on her, politely and permanently. "Why me?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Because you are small," she said. "No one is watching you. No one thinks a human notices anything." It should have insulted me. Instead, it gave me an idea. "I want to be honest about something before I go further. I am not a soldier. I have never held a weapon in my life, and I never intended to start that night. What I had was something quieter, and, as it turned out, far more dangerous. I understood systems. I had spent 2 years learning exactly how Imperial logistics worked, which channels were watched, which were forgotten, which forms nobody double-checked because they were considered too boring to fake. I told Severin to go home and act as if nothing had happened. Then I sat at my terminal and started pulling threads. The compliance unit that had taken Illyra operated out of a holding facility 3 sectors away, connected to the outpost through a transit route used mostly for prisoner transfers and decommissioned equipment. I had access to that route because, 6 months earlier, I had quietly fixed a corrupted manifest system that the Imperial engineers could not be bothered to repair themselves. They gave me limited clearance as a thank you, never imagining a human would remember every detail of how it worked. I remembered everything. The first thing I did was locate Illyra's transfer record. It listed her as scheduled for re-education processing in 9 days. 9 days sounded like plenty of time, until I read the fine print, which explained that re-education candidates were transferred early whenever the facility had extra capacity. There was no guarantee she had 9 days. She might have 9 hours. I could not storm a facility. I could not fight guards or break locks. What I could do was make her disappear from the system before the system remembered she existed. I built a small program that night, nothing dramatic, just a set of quiet instructions that would slip through the manifest software, using the same access I had used to fix it months before. The program would not delete her file, because deleted files raise alarms. Instead, it would quietly reclassify her as a maintenance transfer, the kind of record nobody reads twice, and reroute her scheduled transport to a corridor that led toward the outpost instead of the facility. It was a small lie hidden inside a much larger and much more boring truth. Bureaucracies love boring truths. They rarely question them. I sent the program through at 2 a.m. outpost time, when traffic on the network was lightest. Then I did something that surprised even me. I did not stop there. While I waited to see if the reroute would work, I kept reading. The deeper I went into the compliance unit's records, the more I realized Illyra was not an unusual case. She was one name among hundreds, all pulled in on thin charges, all quietly processed through the same tired paperwork, all forgotten by a system too large and too proud to notice its own cruelty. Something in me refused to walk away once I saw that pattern. I am not going to pretend I had some grand plan from the beginning. I did not. What I had was frustration, and frustration, when paired with patience, can become something powerful. I began mapping every transfer route connected to that facility. I found weak points in their tracking software, places where records synced only once a day instead of continuously, places where a single technician somewhere far away had clearly grown lazy with updates. Over the following 2 days, working quietly between my regular shifts, I rerouted 17 more transfers. Not by force, not by breaking anything, but by convincing the system that these people were something other than what they were. Maintenance staff, equipment escorts, administrative errors waiting to be corrected. Each change was small enough to avoid triggering review, but together, they created a growing hole in the compliance unit's numbers. Severin found me on the 3rd night, pale and shaking, holding a data slate with her sister's location confirmed at the outpost's outer dock, safe, disoriented, but free. "How?" she asked, staring at me like I was something she no longer understood. "I did not break in anywhere," I told her. "I just made your empire's own paperwork lie to itself." She laughed, but it was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone realizing the ground beneath her was less solid than she had believed. I should have stopped there. Getting Illyra out was the goal. It was done. But bureaucracies, once disturbed, do not stay quiet, and neither did I. On the 4th day, an internal audit flagged unusual activity in the compliance unit's regional transfer records. Not because anyone suspected sabotage, but because too many files no longer matched their totals. Someone finally noticed the missing prisoners were not missing. They were simply misfiled into categories that made no sense once examined closely. By the time Imperial investigators traced the irregularities back through the system, they did not find a hacker, a spy, or a rebel cell. They found a single human freight technician's access credentials attached to 17 quiet corrections, each one legal by the letter of the code I had used, each one nearly invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. I was called before the Outpost's Administrative Council 2 days later. I expected anger. I expected punishment. What I got instead was something stranger. The council members, all Threshkari, sat in careful silence as their chief investigator, a tall official named Voss Kaith, laid out what I had done, piece by piece, on a display in front of me. "You did not break a single law," he said, his voice tight with something between disbelief and unease. "You used our own systems, our own procedures, our own carelessness, and turned them against us without ever raising a weapon." "I helped a friend," I said. "Then I kept helping." "That is what concerns us," he replied. "You are one technician, with limited clearance, no military training, and no authority. If one human, acting alone and unarmed, can quietly dismantle an entire regional detention pipeline using nothing but patience and paperwork, then what happens when your species decides to act with purpose instead of kindness?" I did not have a clean answer for him, because it was the first time I understood the truth of what I had done. I had not planned to frighten an empire. I had planned to help one woman find her sister. But somewhere between the first quiet lie in a manifest file and the 17th, I had shown them something they had never considered, that gentleness and precision, used together, could be more unsettling than any show of force. Severin stood outside the council chamber when I finally left, Illyra beside her, both of them watching me with expressions I could not fully read. "Why did you really help us?" Severin asked. "You had nothing to gain. You risked everything you had here." I thought about it for a long moment before answering. Because I saw someone being erased quietly, and I decided quiet things can be undone quietly too, I said. Your empire rules through fear and paperwork. It never expected someone to use its own paperwork against it out of nothing but kindness. She looked at me for a long time, then finally spoke, her voice lower than before. That is exactly why they are afraid of you now. Not because you are strong, because you are patient, careful, and impossible to predict, and you did all of this simply because someone asked. I did not have a response to that. I only nodded, took Alira's hand for a brief moment in the human gesture of reassurance, and walked back toward my quarters, aware for the first time that somewhere far above me, in halls I would never see, an empire was quietly rewriting its assumptions about a species it had always considered too small to matter. They were wrong, not because humans were dangerous in the way they feared. We were dangerous because we cared enough to be patient, and patience, in the right hands, can move through an empire's own bones without ever needing to raise a fist.